Here is the fact first. Scientists tested teeth from 20 Homo naledi individuals found deep inside South Africa's Rising Star cave system. Every reliable result was consistent with a biological female. Not one showed the male marker. If those 20 individuals were a random mixture of males and females, getting the same sex 20 times would be roughly a 1 in a million result. So the cave is telling us one of two extraordinary stories. Either these ancient human relatives treated their dead differently depending on sex, or Homo naledi males carried a genetic change that hid the marker entirely. The second answer may be even stranger than the first. Homo naledi already seemed almost designed to confuse us. The species lived between about 335,000 and 241,000 years ago, when early members of our own species were also living in Africa. Yet its brain was only a little larger than a chimpanzee's. Its shoulders and curved fingers looked ancient, while its feet, legs, and parts of its hands looked surprisingly human. It was not our direct reflection and not a simple missing link. It was another kind of human relative sharing the continent with our ancestors. Its remains were discovered in 2013 beyond a maze of tight passages in the Rising Star cave system. Reaching the Naledi chamber meant climbing, squeezing, and descending into darkness. The route was so restrictive that a specially selected team of small cavers carried out the first excavation. Inside, they recovered more than 1,500 fossil pieces, representing infants, children, adults, and elderly individuals. Almost no other large animal remains were mixed with them. The chamber looked less like a predator's den and more like a place where bodies had somehow accumulated over time. That created a fierce argument. Some researchers proposed that Homo naledi deliberately carried its dead into the cave. If true, a small-brained human relative may have practiced a form of mortuary behavior long before such behavior was expected. Other scientists argued that the evidence was not enough to prove intentional burial. Water, gravity, accidents, or repeated natural movement still had to be considered. The new protein result does not end that debate. It makes the pattern inside the cave much harder to ignore. For years, the skeletons themselves offered a clue. Many adults looked unusually similar in size and shape. In most primate and human populations, males and females create at least some visible range in body and tooth dimensions. Rising Star did not show much of that range. Even some of the larger, more complete individuals that had been considered possible males did not clearly separate from the rest. Scientists needed a test that did not depend only on the shape of a bone. DNA would normally be the obvious choice, but ancient African DNA is difficult to preserve. Heat, moisture, and time break the long molecule into pieces until almost nothing readable remains. Tooth enamel offers another archive. Enamel is the hardest tissue in the body. During childhood, proteins used to build it become trapped inside its mineral structure. Those proteins can survive for hundreds of thousands, and sometimes millions, of years after DNA has disappeared. The team sampled 23 teeth representing at least 20 Homo naledi individuals. They used a minimally destructive acid etching method, removing an extremely thin layer from the enamel rather than cutting apart the whole fossil. The dissolved material went into a mass spectrometer. That instrument separated tiny protein fragments by mass, allowing researchers to identify the molecular pieces preserved inside each tooth. The key proteins were amylogenins. Individuals with two X chromosomes normally produce an X-linked form called amyl X. Individuals with a Y chromosome normally also produce a Y-linked form called amyly. Find amyly peptides in enamel, and the tooth came from a biological male. Find strong amyl X evidence but no amyly, and the result is consistent with a biological female, provided the test was sensitive enough to detect the missing marker. The result repeated across the cave. Infants, children, adults, and older individuals all produced the same basic signal. Amylex appeared. Amyly did not. The teeth came from different parts of Rising Star, including the Naledi and Naledi chambers and other fossil locations. This was not one small cluster from one corner. It was the largest extinct hominin group ever examined with ancient protein sex analysis, and no male individual was confidently identified. The researchers attacked the obvious problem. What if the method simply failed to recover amylae? They used two extraction approaches and several analytical strategies. Male markers have been recovered with similar methods from other ancient hominins, including Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo antecessor, and Homo erectus. Preservation alone could not easily explain why 20 Homo naledi individuals all lost only the male signal while retaining the X-linked protein. That brings us back to the first possibility. Perhaps Rising Star did not receive a random sample of the population. Perhaps females were carried to these deep chambers, while males were treated somewhere else. The group includes every age, from babies to old adults, so it does not look like a single accident affecting one group of young people. If the bodies were deliberately placed, the pattern could represent sex-based mortuary behavior more than 250,000 years ago. That would be astonishing. Human societies have separated burials by family, status, age, role, and sex in many later periods. But the possible Homo naledi pattern would be older than any accepted Neanderthal or Homo sapiens burial site. It would suggest that a species with a very small brain organized death through a social rule complex enough to be followed repeatedly across generations in the darkness of the same cave system. But there is a second explanation. Homo naledi males may have existed in the sample while carrying no usable amylae marker. Some living human males have deletions of the amylae gene. A Neanderthal male has also been found without it. If Homo naledi had a population-wide mutation, a male tooth could look female to this specific protein test. In that case, the cave would not reveal an all-female practice. It would reveal an unexpected change in the biology of an entire extinct species. The researchers consider that broad genetic explanation less likely. A rare deletion in one male is possible. The same deletion in many unrelated males across different ages and cave locations is much harder to accept. To make a mixed group look entirely female, the change would need to be common, perhaps nearly universal, among Homo naledi males. Nothing comparable has been demonstrated across another human species. The proteins contained another reward. This was the first molecular information ever recovered from Homo naledi. The team found no meaningful variation among the enamel protein sequences they examined. They also identified a change in the AMELX protein, not seen in the other hominins used for comparison, plus an ancestral protein variant shared with the much older relative Paranthropus robustus. A few fragments from teeth had begun giving Homo naledi a molecular identity, not just a skeleton. Still, the headline needs one careful correction. The study found no male markers. It did not directly prove that every Homo naledi individual in Rising Star was female. Protein evidence is powerful, but amylae can disappear through genetics, and the exact history of the bodies remains debated. The result narrows the realistic explanations without choosing the final one. It turns an old cave mystery into a testable question. Future work can separate the possibilities. Researchers can sample more teeth from Rising Star and search for other proteins linked to biological sex. New fossils from outside the cave could reveal whether male skeletons look different. Better molecular methods may recover additional Y-linked evidence. If every new Rising Star individual continues to appear female, while Homo naledi remains elsewhere, include males, the case for deliberate selection becomes much stronger. Now imagine what either answer means. In one version, Homo naledi groups repeatedly carried female bodies through a dangerous underground route and placed them beyond daylight. They remembered the chambers, returned with the dead, and followed a social rule we can no longer name. In the other version, males stood among those same remains, but their species had rewritten a piece of the Y chromosome so completely that our normal test cannot see them. 20 ancient individuals, 20 female-associated results, 0 confident male markers. The fact is simple enough to say in one breath, but its meaning reaches far beyond one cave. Rising Star may preserve the oldest known evidence of sex, shaping how a human relative treated the dead.
or it may preserve a biological difference no scientist expected. The next tooth could decide which story survives.